Lewis Hamilton is the most successful F1 driver of all time. He's the only driver in F1 to have more than 100 victories to his name, and some of those victories happen to be some of the greatest F1 racers of all time. But the question is, what are his 10 greatest victories? Well, that is the question that I'm going to be answering today as I rank what are my personal 10 greatest victories in Lewis Hamilton's F1 career. But I would also love to hear what are your 10 greatest victories that Lewis Hamilton has ever had in Formula 1, so down below in the comments be sure to let me know, as I am sure your list will probably be different to mine, which I think is pretty amazing because it shows just how many amazing victories Lewis Hamilton has had in his very illustrious F1 career. Now, let's get into the video. In 10th place, I've gone for the 2010 Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. The 2010 Belgian Grand Prix was a classic race. It's a crucial time in the 2010 season. It was the first race back after the mid-season break and things in the championship was heating up. The top 3 were separated by just 10 points and the top 5 was all still within 20 points of each other. This made the race even more important. On top of this, Belgium cooked up one of its infamous wet-dry races, where the circuit would be damp, dry, wet a bit, and all 3 options on the same lap. Lewis Hamilton started in 2nd place behind Mark Webber on pole position. Off the line, Lewis took the lead, which is not really a surprise given Mark Webber is famous for being awful at getting an F1 car off the line. And towards the end of the very first lap, rain started to fall on circuit, which caused mayhem. Rubens Barrichello steamed into the back of Fernando Alonso, and some drivers opted to box for inters, and this incident brought out a safety car. On the restart, Lewis managed to fend off his teammate and fellow title rival Jenson Button. Lewis was then able to pull away, and on lap 16, the rain started to fall again. And this time, there would be a major championship ramifications as 2 of the 5 title protagonists collided as Sebastian Vettel hit Jenson Button. But Lewis was able to keep calm and cool despite the difficult and changing conditions. He was able to change from the options to prime tyres and maintain the lead, but on lap 34, guess what happened? The rain started to fall again, but this time Lewis would make a mistake. He slid off and brushed the wall at Rivage, but he managed to make it back to the pits and was able to change to the intermediate tyres. Some drivers opted for full wets as the Bridgestone full wets were actually good tyres back then. On lap 38, another safety car came out, wiping away Lewis's lead once again, and this time it was because another championship rival was out. This time it was Fernando Alonso, and then the race got back underway. And in one of the trickiest races of all time, Lewis Hamilton took victory and at the time, the lead of the championship. In 9th place, the 2018 German Grand Prix at Hockenheim. For the race, Lewis was all the way down in P14 due to a hydraulic issue in qualifying. In the race, Lewis started on the medium spec tyres, which were the soft tyres, whereas the top drivers were on the softest tyres, which were the ultra soft tyres. And for newer fans, just don't ask about the tyres. Back then it made very little sense, and even today it still doesn't make a great deal of sense. Anyway, off the line, Lewis did not make up much ground as it was not until the end of the first lap where Lewis was able to get past Sergei Sorokin in the Williams. From there he got Ocon and Alonso and was then up to P11. Hamilton then passed everyone in between and he made his way up to P5. On lap 14, Kimi Raikkonen boxed in the Ferrari for soft compound tyres, but he came out in front of Lewis. And then on lap 25, Vettel boxed in his Ferrari and he came out behind Kimi Raikkonen, but still 3.5 seconds in front of Lewis Hamilton, who at this point was on aging soft tyres. On lap 29, Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull broke down, which is not really a surprise, and Bottas opted to pit, but Bottas came out behind Lewis Hamilton. At this point in the race, Vettel, Raikkonen and Bottas had made their mandatory pit stop, unlike Lewis Hamilton. Lap 42, and Lewis was still on the soft tyres that he started the race on, but at the end of that lap, they finally boxed Lewis for the ultra soft tyres after he did a mammoth stint of 42 laps on soft, and made his way all the way from 14th to 5th. Lap 44, the rain started to fall, and it fell heavy in sections. However, with Lewis on fresh ultra soft tyres, he had the best tyres. Max at this point stopped for the intermediates, giving Lewis P4, and then on lap 51, Raikkonen was trying to lap the midfield, but he went wide onto the slipperier paint. Then Sebastian Vettel went off into the wall and was out of the race, bringing out the safety car. Bottas and Raikkonen decided to stop, putting Lewis in the lead of the race. And when the race got back underway, Lewis defended heavily from Bottas. But by this point, Mercedes called off the fight, and Lewis Hamilton went on to claim a brilliant victory starting from P14. Truly a performance in which Lewis Hamilton was under maximum pressure but managed to keep calm. In 8th place, we are sticking with the country of Germany, but this time we move to the 2011 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. 2011 was a year dominated by Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull. Lewis Hamilton really struggled this year as the change from Bridgestone to Pirelli tyres hurt him more than other drivers, as Lewis at this point of his career was famous for his aggression, which meant that he was typically harder on his tyres, but this weekend nothing was going to stop him. Much like Belgium in 2010, the grid saw Webber on pole position from Lewis Hamilton in 2nd place, and shock horror once again, Webber got a bad start, allowing Lewis to take the lead of the race. Red Bull boxed Webber early and used that to undercut Lewis, who had a slow stop, meaning that the fight for first was now between Webber, Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. At the second round of stops, Lewis just managed to squeeze and stay ahead of Mark Webber, but Alonso perfected the overcut, or at least that's what we thought, until Lewis danced around his outside to take the lead again. But for the final stop, Lewis stopped first and perfected the undercut. Lewis, with a 3-stop strategy, was able to hold off Mark Webber in the dominant Red Bull and Fernando Alonso in the Ferrari, and Lewis claimed one of his very rare victories in the 2011 season with an incredible performance. In 7th place, the 2016 Brazilian Grand Prix. This was the penultimate race in the World Championship, and this was a must-win race for Lewis Hamilton in his fight with his teammate Nico Rosberg. For Lewis, this race was all about keeping his composure in the worst possible conditions, and he did that despite there being 4 safety cars and multiple collisions further back. Lewis was able to keep the car on track and win the race from Nico Rosberg in 2nd place, but he was 11.45 seconds back. If the race went all the way without any safety cars, Lewis probably could have won that race by over 30 seconds. Now, he was fighting with Max Verstappen at one point, and this was one of Max's greatest performances, but sometimes overlooked is what Lewis did in this race. Lewis was fantastic. He managed to do the entire race without making a single mistake, despite the fact that the rain was consistently pouring down over the Sao Paulo circuit. A truly incredible performance by Lewis Hamilton. In 6th place, we're sticking with the wet weather theme, as it's the 2007 Japanese Grand Prix. This Grand Prix is one that doesn't always get talked about when talking about Lewis Hamilton's best F1 wins, but this was certainly a great race for Lewis in what was probably the worst conditions I have ever seen F1 cars race in live, but thankfully back then the tyres were good enough for extreme rain. The safety car was out for the first 19 laps, but when the race did get underway, Lewis was able to slowly open up a gap to teammate Fernando Alonso, and they very quickly dropped to the rest of the field, as behind, they were getting involved in incidents and silly little spins. At the first round of stops, Alonso stopped first but came out in P8, and then several laps later, Lewis Hamilton came in for his first stop, but he managed to maintain the lead. But now, with fresh wets to go until the end of the Grand Prix, Lewis was just unstoppable. These conditions I just cannot describe how wet it was on track. On lap 41, Alonso crashed heavily and was out of the race, bringing out the safety car. But in the end of the race, Lewis won the race by 8.3 seconds in the most appalling conditions. In 5th place, the 2021 Brazilian Grand Prix. Now, before anyone starts, no, Lewis did not win this race starting in last place. He won the race starting from 10th place. He finished 5th place in the sprint race, but he had a grid drop due to changing the internal combustion engine of 5 places, hence why he started the main Grand Prix from 10th place. Even so, this was still one of the greatest performances Lewis Hamilton put into a Formula 1 weekend. Lewis was on another level, with his fresh engine turned all the way up to the max. By the end of lap 1, Lewis had moved from 10th place to 6th place as he overtook Ocon, Norris, Gasly and Sebastian Vettel, all in brilliant fashion. On lap 3, Lewis Hamilton blew past Sainz for 5th, and then on the same lap, blew past Charles Leclerc for 4th, Taking 2 Ferraris on 1 lap is no mean feat. It was incredible stuff by Lewis. And then finally on lap 5, Bottas gave way to Hamilton, meaning that after only 5 laps, Lewis was now on the podium and chasing down the 2 Red Bulls. But this is where things were going to start getting a little bit more difficult for Lewis. On lap 18, Lewis went for the move on Perez. He took the position, but Perez was not going to give up and he retook the position once again from Lewis. And then on lap 19, Lewis tried once again, and this time he managed to make it stick and was now up to 2nd place after only 19 laps. Next up for him was his rival in the World Championship, Max Verstappen. On lap 58, Lewis went for the move on Max, but Max forced himself and Lewis off the track. But 1 lap later, just 1 lap on lap 59, Lewis took the lead of the Grand Prix with a beautiful overtake and then decided to swerve across Max to make sure that Max couldn't try what he tried 1 lap prior. And from there he took victory and was now within striking distance of Max Verstappen in the World Championship. In 4th place, the 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix. The legendary duel in the desert is in 4th place for me, and this race was incredible. After a fairly lackluster opening few races in 2014, Bahrain was just brilliant. Lewis Hamilton and teammate Nico Rosberg put on a show. Lewis got the jump off the line, and during the first stint it seemed like it would be an easy Lewis win. But then at the end of the first stint, Lewis and Rosberg were fighting hard as Rosberg was desperate to get past and into the lead so that he could pit before Lewis. But Lewis was just able to hold him off. Later in the race, the safety car came out after Maldonado flipped Gutierrez, leaving him a little bit confused. When the race got back underway, the 2 Mercedes cars were dueling hard. Rosberg had the faster tyres on with the soft tyres, whereas Hamilton was on mediums. But Hamilton was not giving up and had to use every inch of his skill and ability to fight Rosberg and maintain the lead. At times Rosberg did get past, but Lewis would quickly overtake Rosberg to retake the lead just a couple of corners later. And towards the end of the race, Lewis's medium tyres became the better tyre, and Lewis was able to hold off Rosberg and win the Grand Prix in what was an instant classic. In 3rd place, the 2019 Hungarian Grand Prix. This race was one of Lewis Hamilton's finest races, where he had to absolutely fight the entire race in order to win. Off the line, Max Verstappen got the edge on the 2 Mercedes. Bottas forced his way into 2nd place off of the first corner, but then Lewis squeezed his way around the outside of turn 2 into turn 3 with a brilliant overtake to take 2nd place. In the race, Max was off into the distance. On lap 26, things were not looking great for Lewis. Max was ahead and boxed first to get the undercut on Lewis, who boxed 6 laps later. On lap 38, Lewis had caught up and was now only 0.8 of a second behind Max, and the fight was on. Max was fighting hard against Lewis, and neither driver was going to give an inch. Lewis on lap 39 flew around the outside and did get ahead, but was not able to keep the car on track, and Max was able to get back into the lead of the Grand Prix, and they carried on fighting very hard and very aggressively until lap 48 when Lewis made a second stop to go from hards to another set of medium tyres. From lap 49 until lap 66, Lewis Hamilton put in qualifying lap after qualifying lap after qualifying lap. And on lap 66, Lewis had closed a full pit stop gap, and then on lap 67, Lewis went right around the outside of Max Verstappen and took the lead to win the race with just 3 laps left to spare. An incredible race and an early preview of what was to come in 2021. In 2nd place, the 2008 Monaco Grand Prix. This race was a real test of nerve for Lewis Hamilton. This was a difficult race for him. He qualified down in 3rd place, but race day was wet, and to kick off the race, Kimi Raikkonen ahead of him got a bad start, and Lewis was then up to 2nd place. But on lap 6, Lewis hit the wall hard on the exit of Tabak, so much so that he needed to pit for a fresh set of intermediate tyres because he had a puncture. And during this pit stop, McLaren filled Lewis Hamilton up as much as they could with fuel, meaning that the next stint was going to be a very long stint on a fresh set of intermediates. But even though it was a long stop, he still managed to rejoin the race in 5th place, so he didn't actually lose a great deal. A lot of drivers were struggling around the streets as multiple drivers brushed the wall due to the lack of grip on track, and then later on in the race the rain intensified and some drivers opted to switch onto the full wet tyres. Race leader at the time, Felipe Massa, went straight on at turn 1, and then his teammate Kimi Raikkonen did the same thing. but Hamilton was now in the lead of the race. He didn't change from wets to winters, he stayed on those same intermediates that he was on after lap number 6. And he stayed on those tyres until it dried out. On lap 54, Lewis stopped for a second time, but this time went from intermediates to dry compound tyres. And even though he did that, he emerged 13 seconds ahead of Felipe Massa. Things were now looking very comfy for Lewis. After an early mistake, he was able to recover and now was in the lead of the race by over 13 seconds. But this lead was washed away by the safety car after Kimi Raikkonen wiped out a Force India. But on the restart, now that it was dry on the streets of Monte Carlo, Lewis was able to hold on and win the Monaco Grand Prix. This was a race where a Lewis mistake early on paid dividends later and really did help him win the Grand Prix, and we got to see his supreme skill. In first place, the 2008 British Grand Prix. Yep, we are sticking with the 2008 season, and once again it was another brilliant wet race. Lewis is truly a fantastic driver in the wet, and this Grand Prix was pure domination by Lewis Hamilton. He started the race down in 4th place, but got the perfect launch and was up to 2nd already, and almost had the lead. Multiple drivers spun at the beginning of the race, with Webber having a spin, and Felipe Massa having the first of, well, a lot of spins. On lap number 5, Lewis took the lead of the race from Heikki Kovalainen, and then after this, Raikkonen got past Heikki Kovalainen as well, and was able to close the gap to Lewis Hamilton. After this, on lap 21, both Raikkonen and Lewis stopped for fuel. Raikkonen kept his old intermediates on, whereas Lewis put fresh intermediate tyres on, and this turned out to be a great call by McLaren and Lewis Hamilton, due to the rain coming back down once again at Silverstone. Due to him keeping on used inters, Kimi Raikkonen was lapping approximately 5 seconds a lap slower than Lewis Hamilton. For Lewis at this point, he was just flying. He was several seconds faster than anyone else on circuit. It was very similar to Michael Schumacher in Spain in 1996, where there was times where Schumacher was 5-6 seconds a lap faster. Lewis was doing the exact same thing in the 2008 British Grand Prix. He was just flying. He was cool, calm and collected despite the heavy rain on track, and the track now at some points in the race being too wet for the intermediates. But even with that, Lewis stayed on those intermediate tyres, and by the end of the race, Lewis Hamilton won the British Grand Prix by over 1 minute from Nick Heidfeld in 2nd place and Rubens Barrichello in 3rd. If you have never watched this race before, I highly recommend you check it out because it was truly a legendary drive by Lewis Hamilton. So that is my list. Do you agree, or would there be any other races that you would put into Hamilton's top 10 wins? Let me know in the comment section down below, as I read and respond to pretty much every single comment. And as always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching, guys. Bye.